Okay, so I'm doing something different. I'm going to do a reaction video to a video that I'm actually in. Thank you for joining me, by the way. I what would you say? Logged into a, I want to say call in, but that ain't quite right. You log into an atheist. I logged into another person's YouTube channel. They're an atheist. They tend to talk about, I would say deep philosophical stuff. I'm into that stuff. I frequent his channel from time to time. I like the guy, the guy's personality and the way he thinks, other than the fact that the conclusions he comes to. Um, have a decent relationship with him, and I called in on at this, how you have this idea anytime you leave a conversation, especially deep conversations there where you're in a disagreement with somebody. There's this idea that maybe there are things left unsaid, things you shouldn't have said, or corrections that you'd like to make, that sort of thing. So I thought, let me just watch it with people. I'll watch, it'll be a reaction video. Let's talk about it, I guess, and I'll stop every now and again and
Yeah, there you go.
all right, didn't see that. Kind of give my
Okay,
piece
Franklin,
on it.
let me guess what you want to talk about. You want to talk about,
I've got a lot of things.
okay, then you,
Now, one thing specific. One thing specific.
okay, go ahead.
I thought that I heard you say or imply that most of the positive human rules or ideas about human interactions that Christianity brings to Western civilization actually come from the Enlightenment. Did I hear that correct?
No, that's not correct. I didn't say that most of what we have comes from the Enlightenment. I say we're products of the Enlightenment, so we have gotten better.
So the Christianity pre-Enlightenment was worse than the post-Christianity
Yes,
Enlightenment? Okay.
but
Okay.
that's the same for Islam. That's the same for all humans.
Okay, just real quick. So you see what he did there. This is something needs to be pointed out. The perspective of the atheist typically is one that's biased toward modernity. So people today are much smarter and better than what they were in the past. So even when it comes to religions, the religions that we have today are better than the religions in the past because of atheist sort of thought. Kind of what he's saying, right? Because enlightenment, atheists love the enlightenment. They really do. I did a video on the enlightenment, and it kind of talked about it in regards to comparing and contrasting the French Revolution to the American Revolution, in that the results of the French Revolution were pretty disastrous, reasonably speaking. I think most people would agree with that. It did not bring about the utopian society that was promised, whereas the American Revolution brought about, I mean, we're pretty terrible now, but all the innovations, the things that atheists would talk about and love today came about through that. Now, atheists would probably claim all that in regards to the Enlightenment because, in fairness to them, the American Revolution is a product of the Enlightenment, or that the founding fathers were Enlightenment type people. But the difference is, and this is why I contrasted the French Revolution, is because of the idea that the French Revolution in this concept of throwing off the shackles of the terrestrial dictator, um, they decided that it made sense also to throw off the quote unquote shackles of the divine dictator as well. Whereas the American Revolution kept the providence of God always at the forefront. In fact, John Adams said that you cannot have the Constitution, which is this idea of individual freedom that we have in our nation, unless you have a religious people. And so you see, it was both and when it came. And you can see how apropos this is to this question, because he's basically saying um, atheism makes atheistic thinking, i.e., Enlightenment thinking, makes religion better. I would argue that just that example I said shows that there's no problem with thinking, by the way, but the idea of throwing God out of the equation is to our detriment. And I know that that's a little bit deeper than what I wanted to go, but I think it's important to lay the foundation for what we're going to talk about here as we get moving forward.
I would still differ with that because I think that means you think the Enlightenment is a net positive. It could be, but I look at it as a mixed bag because I think evolution, from what I understand, would be considered a product of the Enlightenment. I know that people.
No, the Enlightenment's
like
a product of evolution.
Did I reverse that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're correct. That's what I meant to say.
Okay, real quick, that is not what I meant to say. This is one of those situations where you think I thought he was correcting me in regards to what I said, and you can kind of see that. He's correcting me in regards to saying that I'm just wrong about it. So I agreed with his opinion when I really shouldn't have, and I didn't mean to do that. What he's saying is that because we evolved, therefore we became enlightened, right? I'm saying, philosophically speaking, that the philosophy or the idea, the construct of evolution comes from us, and it comes out of this desire the Enlightenment desire to throw off God. And that's a big difference. So that's a big, it's a score a point for him, I suppose, on that, because he got me to reverse my position accidentally. So, but clarification needs to be made there.
But in that comes eugenics and racism, or at least scientifically based or amplified racism. Of course, we had it beforehand, so I'm not saying evolution played that.
Racism got worse after the Enlightenment? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that it gave it scientific justification.
And you define racism as that certain races are superior to other races?
Correct. As Darwin in Descent of Man defined it, right?
Real quick, again, this is an important point for me because I'm not trying to say that religion doesn't do the same thing, but it's often what happens is that atheists will tend to use, they will go after the Bible on issues of slavery. They will go after the Bible on issues. They will say the founding fathers were religious and they had slaves, this sort of thing. And I did a video on the fact that, when they were trying to cancel Dr. Seuss, removing Dr. Seuss books out of schools because I guess it came out that maybe he had some, prejudiced opinions of some sort. And yet we teach as doctrine to our kids in schools Darwin. And so you see that there's this odd, idea that they're whitewashing Darwin, I guess is the point. And then they also want to blackwash, well, that doesn't sound good, especially dealing with race. But they want to smear all faiths, or especially Christianity, with a racially charged and negatively racially charged thing, and then leave theirs pristine clean when it's not. I would argue racism is a human component. It's a component of sin, and the Bible says nothing about that. I mean, it talks about slavery, and I can do a video on that at some point, but the Bible says very clearly that we all come from Adam. So,
Right? I mean, he put the ethnicities in the category of more evolved to less evolved.
Because there's a difference between some of the things Darwin said and just evolution in general. Like, I know for evangelical Christians, whenever they think evolution, they think Darwin, but evolution would exist whether Darwin existed or not.
Yeah, see, on this point real quick, he's saying that because he thinks it's fact. For him, it's a fact that evolution exists. Like he would say, well, you don't need Newton to point out gravity. Gravity would still exist without Newton. And if it's a fact, it's a fact. It doesn't matter who points it out, and I'll grant him that. And I don't really care one way or the other who gets credit for it, but I don't think evolution exists one way or another. And I think we dive a little bit more into that, but I think that essentially that I don't know. We'll keep going. Let's see what happens.
No, I think that's true.
So his opinions don't represent the opinions of every evolutionist out there.
Right. But it's part and parcel. Well, but
oh yeah, that's what I was thinking about saying was evolution. Even this idea of Darwin, I think, is a bit of propaganda. He didn't step off of the Beagle and get slapped in the face with the truth of evolution. That's what they want to tell you. So, I bring up Darwin because they bring up Darwin. They're the ones that push this story on everybody. Truth of the matter is that if you look into it, Charles Darwin's granddaddy was pushing this concept. I don't think it was called evolution. That was a term, I think, that we owe to Charles Darwin, but Charles Darwin's granddaddy was pushing this. This was a family thing. This was not again, they make it seem like he just discovered this thing, and Charles Darwin was a theologian. He wasn't even a scientist. So
see, his opinions resonate to this sort of conversation because oftentimes, like as an example, if Hitler uses a religious component to justify killing Jews, it's fair, and an atheist is fair game to say that. But I think in the same way, it would be fair to say, well, he also was very, very influenced by Darwinian thought and evolutionary thought, and I mean that's where we get this. Because I think you would say that the Enlightenment was very scientifically based, and so, or at least proposed itself to be. So therefore, you have this scientific veneer that's placed upon racism that otherwise would not be. It would be more brutal and tribal.
What's the main
transparently?
The main thing about evolution is that it's the common descent part, right? So a person like Darwin or any person could say that some races may be superior than others, but they're still saying at the same hand that we all come from a common ancestor. We're all cousins, right?
Right.
So one can use that and say, well, we should view humanity as we're all like colleagues on this ball and we have to work together. And some of us, and even if they believe that some of us are better than others, they're just like the crazy uncle or the, whatever. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, for me, the way that with Christianity, though, you've got two separate paradigms that are very different. So you're talking about how they're applied, but in regards to their nature, just, not in how they're applied, but just if you look at them sterilely, Christianity proposes Old Testament, the idea that we all come from one human made as humans. And so when you get this evolutionary idea, you can't, because listen, you've had the conversation in regards to treatment of animals on your program before.
Yeah.
So that has to play if you have this concept of human interaction and how we treat one another.
Good point.
And then you're also saying that some humans are more animals than others. That has to be a logical.
No, I would never say that. We're all animals.
Okay, on this point, that's he should understand what I'm saying here. When I say you, I mean the grand you. I don't, and that can be confusing, but so I should have been more clear on that. But the point he was granting me was there was a conversation that they had. Like atheists sometimes have a problem because on the one hand, because they devalue humans, they're not divinely created and they are animals, it becomes a little bit of a problem when they eat other animals. So that is an argument that atheists have amongst themselves, and that's what I'm referring to. And so this idea, like, you can't say, oh, but evolution says we all come from one thing, and therefore that means you can kind of look at it like we're all one thing, and it's like kumbaya. I mean, that's kind of obfuscating the point, because that's not what Darwin said, and that's what I'm trying to get at is if you can justify cruelty or less humane treatment. I mean, I don't think that, in fairness, I don't think atheists or Doug or anybody like that, that's coming out wrong. Let me say this. You do eat animals, right? I mean, a lot of people do. I do. You don't eat humans, right? Yet evolution says, really how much of a difference is there between the two? You can't avoid that logically when you believe and you set up evolution as a foundation of your paradigm.
But the point, good. When I said good point, because I might have some cognitive dissonance here and am contradicting myself.
Yeah, see, he sees it.
I am a speciesist. I wouldn't call myself a racist, although this critical race theorists say all white people are racist. So if I am a racist, I'm not special. But I do value you, who you're relatively a stranger to me, more than my own dog. Assuming you're not a horrible person, so.
Yeah, and I just think, and that aside, I think, again, that's how we interact with each other. But I think,
well, before I allow myself to continue here, let me interrupt. That whole thing, I don't think helps his argument, right? Because I'm getting at the logical foundation. He says, well, I treat you, or I value you as more than my own dog, and yet I know my dog more than I know you. I would say, in fact, it's interesting. We just got done watching a movie about, a dog and a guy, and it, got those little emotional tugs in the movie. So they're there, but I agree with him. I value this guy more than I value my own dog. Because he's made in the image of God. And I can say that as a Christian, and I don't know where what would you say as an atheist other than, what would you say as an atheist that isn't arbitrary? You have to say, well, I just choose to. You can say that as an atheist, or you can say, evolution. This is another trick they do. Oh, well, evolution has taught us that, or whatever. It's an evolutionary trait. They could say that, or they could say that, well, because I believe in, propagating my own species because it's the higher evolutionary order. Again, it doesn't quite answer the question like I did, which is, this guy Doug is made in the image of God, whether he knows it or not. That's why it's logically consistent for me, and he even sort of alluded to it. He may have cognitive dissonance on this. I think he does.
When you want to be evil, I don't think that it's any different, because people justify evil, and they will use religious means to do it. They will say, and I think that science also is used in the same way. You can justify things that are evil, and you can say, well, this is for the good of mankind, or this is it's okay.
Yeah, people can justify almost anything using almost anything. So what's your point, though?
My overarching point is that I don't think atheists are any different than Christians. I think that when you guys argue, so when the conversation you just had, let me contextualize that broadly from what I saw. What I think is that when you argue Christianity and the points that the justification of it, you're arguing it in a vacuum, where at least this is the way I see it. So correct me if I'm wrong. But you assert the secular worldview as true, but you don't argue it. So what I say is that there's two competing claims, and both need to be evaluated simultaneously as almost like a list of positives and negatives, whereas you're just focused on Christianity and whether or not the claims meet the extraordinary standard, that because of the claim, the claim's extraordinary, so the evidence needs to be extraordinary.
I play
what
that.
I would say is we all
just
have extraordinary claims. Y'all have an extraordinary claim to make, but you guys say, well, you've made it. Science has made it for us. And so and my point is to say that you guys there is no difference between human behavior, because when I'm arguing with a atheist, you guys have this kind of an authoritative position that you guys have established things based on evidence. And so when I go to look for the evidence, I don't see that. I see you guys making faith-based claims. Like you got into a conversation with the last guest in regards to what is faith. I would say you guys actually have faith too. The difference is that the Christian or any other religion is more honest in that we say, well, we're actually
Can you give an
making
example of a faith-based claim that I would have? Because what's the definition? Yes. Your definition or his definition?
All right, so real quick, that's a crucial point that I'm making there. I'm making it specifically to him, but it applies to a lot of atheists. I'm very familiar with this guy, and the biggest problem I have with the way he evaluates things, he's super smart. This guy's very smart. The issue that he has, and the reason why I would argue he's coming to the wrong conclusions, is the fact that he's not actually evaluating everything. He has assumed the secular world and the scientific world has already done the work for him. And they've established we come from monkeys. The universe is a Google's worth years old. The Earth is 3.333, what billion years old or whatever nonsense they want to say. And so they just say, the experts have said, and the science is settled. This is where we get this in our society and in our politics, when the science becomes settled, because this is something that has permeated our culture through the evolutionary or Enlightenment thinking for some time. So they go, I don't have to evaluate whether or not atheism is better than Christianity and then evaluate them simultaneously, right? I just go, let's focus on Christianity, and if I can poke holes in Christianity, therefore that establishes my scientific secular worldview. And I'm like, no, here's something to get to the point. This guy will say things like doubt is a virtue. Well, it is when it comes to Christianity for him. It isn't when it comes to atheism or science, things that he has never tested in a lab. He just believes them because he has been told other scientists have, or they've basically done enough work to where it's been established. And all these things just happen to go against the Bible. Again, if you're going to establish the idea that the Bible isn't true, then you have to look at these claims that permeate your worldview and are the things in which science says are the points of fact that exist, because they go, oh, you're faithful, you don't have fact, and that's not true. But they can find ways around all the facts that we have. And I'm saying, well, do you do that with your worldview? Do you treat Darwin like you treat Matthew from the gospel, right? If they say, oh, if I say I believe what Matthew says, well, he says, well, that's just, what's more likely, that a man walked on water, or that Matthew just wrote that he did? Well, what's more likely, that, a bird changed into or dinosaurs changed into a bird, or Darwin just wrote that they did? But he can't see it that way because he knows evolution's true without really debating it or dealing with it on his own. He just accepts what other people have told him.
The guy who was just on. Because remember how he defined it?
Under his definition. I think yours applies as well.
Okay, so he said his definition was faith is believing things for insufficient reasons. So give an example of me or another atheist that you know that believes things for insufficient reasons at 80% confidence. Because I have beliefs, like I brought up the Arizona Cardinals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can believe things for insufficient reasons, but I would apportion my confidence to it. So I would say, yeah, I believe this, but I could very easily be wrong. It could go either way. I could talk like that. But when you say you're 80% confident, you're saying like it's by far more likely than not.
What is so the subject of this video is let's challenge each other. So, so you've used is that First Kings challenge of the wet napkin for Christians, right? Okay, so let me do that. Let me see if I can do that to you. I'll reverse it. So to give you what I'm talking about.
Okay.
If you want something to be demonstrated,
right?
And then you go, okay, if you can demonstrate it, I'll be more apt to believe. That's basically your position, and it's logical. Okay. What I'm saying is that my hypothesis is that atheism is a faith-based proposition, or
believing things for insufficient reasons. Okay, I want an example.
Okay, demonstrate evolution for me. Any evolution on some scale that has meaning for what the claim is making. That, in other words, we all come, like vastly different creatures come from other creatures. I want to see it, and I'm not at now. It's different because I propose a God who can do what you're asking instantly. So granted, so I will give you what?
Well, evolution is you said in any way, any form, and then you changed it to one species going to another species. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Well, it has to meet in other words, you can't don't give me that. If I can look at a change and say, well, that could be inside the genome, in other words, there's no way to know that that's not epigenetics change, or I want to see a change that I know something different has something.
So fruit flies won't work.
No.
How about a virus going into a different virus? That's not going to work.
Is it a different virus though?
Yeah. Like Delta going to Omicron. Would that count as evolution?
Aren't they all Corona?
Yeah, but
they're all Corona. But
it's a different species, in quotes, of a virus.
So this is a good point right here. This doesn't. It's like they just call it a species, and he's like, yeah, it is. You can't see it. Doug can't see it. Nobody. It's like, he wants. This is what I'm getting at. To prove Christianity, he wants God to light something on fire when he demands it. And all I'm saying is show me anywhere where I can see it. And he gives me, basically, people have said it's now not delta and it's epsilon. Or now they're saying it's like TB 22.9. I mean, something, it's like, what? That's not evidence anywhere near. So the standard is broke here. It's unequal weights and measures. He reads something in a book, somebody says that this is evolution, and he eats it up. Meanwhile, he's very critical and very demanding of what I believe. I don't care necessarily. He can believe whatever he wants, but I'm trying to get through to him that your basis of evidence is super strong for me, and it's super weak for what you believe. And he doesn't see that. And he should see it in what he just said. Because somebody said it changed? I mean, what? That's...
Who said that? Like, how do you know that?
Because it's mutated into something...
You're believing what people tell you on that, right?
Yeah, I'm trusting the experts. You're right.
Well, I mean, if...
But is that an example of evolution to you?
It's an example of change, but the definition of evolution has become so broad it encompasses all of science and any change. So again, because it's Because of that, it's infalsifiable. That's my claim. You can't falsify evolution.
Sure you can.
So therefore, it's not even a scientific theory.
This is good here.
Yeah, you can. You can falsify evolution.
Not practically. Because there's always going to be a way out.
If you found a bunny rabbit skeleton in the Precambrian layer, it's all gone. Well, not all gone, but it's...
But you remember, you used that. I used that on you, I think in our first conversation, because you said that to Mary Schweitzer, and she actually said, but we did, but it was planted. No. So that's the point.
She didn't say that, did she?
Mm-hmm. Go back and watch your video.
About bunny rabbits? In the Precambrian layer?
I'm positive you used that same example. You said, no, because she believes in evolution.
This was like 5 years ago, and I think, if memory serves, she said something like that if we did find one, it could be false. I mean, that someone could have planted it. Granted,
it's been a while since I watched that video, and you've had the conversation a while ago. Yeah. So I'm going by memory just like you are, but as I remember it, but the point, I still would say my point, so you gave a way to falsify, right, and she gave a way out of it.
Right.
I'll give you an example.
You see what I'm saying there? He said it can be falsified. I just showed him how on his own show that was negated. I mean, I don't know what else I can do. On his own show, he said that. And she said, no, they have. And I'd love for him to go back and check and prove me wrong on this. I'm probably not going to do it. I already did it once. So I went back and listened to that show. And he had a lady on who said, they did, but they were planted. Now, maybe it wasn't bunny rabbits. Now, he said bunny rabbit. He said exactly the same thing. I'm pretty positive about that. Maybe she was referring to a similar thing that they found a similar, and I don't remember her saying that, but regardless, the point stands.
Say we found people of different cultures, different geographic regions, all around the world of different fields of study. They all find animal fossils where we originally didn't think they should be. I can guarantee you the whole scientific community would be, number one, very interested, and number two, admit we were wrong.
That's where I would disagree. I don't think the scientific community does what you say. In fact, that's
because you don't trust them.
No, I look at the scientific community the same way that you look at the mainstream media, exactly the way you said it on Tuesday. I don't think there's any difference. And in fact, I think what we saw with the pandemic is an example of it. You cannot remove the propaganda, the politics. You can't remove it. It's interlinked with science.
I think at one point I wanted to say this. There was a company or group or whatever you want to call them that actually they did the peer review situation. They did some papers, scientific papers that were complete bunk, complete garbage. They knew they were garbage. That was the whole point. They knew, and they did like 17 or 18 of papers, something like that, scientific papers, and they passed through with flying colors because they looked at the scientific community, assumed what they wanted to hear, and gave it to them. And that's telling, okay? This idea that science is this self-checking thing, no, it is not. That's my proposition, and I think I can establish that. And if you just aren't if you aren't just inclined to be spoon-fed and believe, you'll see it too.
Science now, it happens in regards to
climate change. I agree with you, Franklin, that there's problems in science and that we're all human and we all have these proclivities to, let's say, want to maybe fudge the data to get ahead. But some people have more of that proclivity than others, and more people have like a moral foundation. But the beauty of science as opposed to religion is that you do have different cultures, different biases converging to the same answer. Whereas in religion, like, try to get Muslims and Christians to agree on the nature of God. Is he a Trinity or a unity? Like, good luck.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't think about this at the time because he kind of went a little bit of a different direction, which was back at religion. That's not unexpected, but um, you know, his point was to say, and I'm thinking about it now, but his point was to say there's all this diversity in religion. Like, okay, so I just told you basically that there's a uniformity in science and it's forced essentially through propaganda, and your point is just to point out the differences in religion. I mean, if we're all humans, then why is there such uniformity in science if it's not external? I guess his point is the truth, but then he just sort of admitted bias and humans play a role. So I don't know why he has such faith in science.
I mean, this goes back to, and I don't want to keep repeating myself because I think I've, brought on, I bring up evolution most of the times I talk to you. So I do sound like a broken record, and then I don't want to, but the point of whether or not people disagree about what divinity is, does, in my mind, pushes towards divinity existing, just us being confused in how it works or how it is, not for that it just doesn't exist. To me, it has more, it would lean more toward there being some divinity. So the idea that humans have a wrong interpretation about or have false examples of it doesn't preclude the concept of the real thing existing.
But would you expect that if there's a deity who not only exists but wants to be known as existing, which is a big if, would you expect all these different versions that we see?
In that sterile or slim down way you pronounced or gave me the question, the answer is no.
Yeah, of course not. Like I would expect if this God exists, and number two,
Say, this is very specific with me, and I like to do this. When I can, I want to agree on the terms that they use, but define those terms. My expectation actually doesn't have anything necessarily to do with reality. What I would expect God to do is completely irrelevant with whether or not God decides to do it that way, because it goes without saying I'm not God.
two wants us to know him. He would have made it clear so we don't have these thousands of religions of different views of who he is.
I mean, I would wish that he would. As a Christian, I would prefer that.
Like the previous
The
guy
way-
didn't even believe that Jesus actually commanded the death of infants in the Old Testament, but you do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's true.
So who's the real God here? Is it your God or his?
I mean, that's to be determined, I suppose. I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to it, right? I mean, maybe you're right. That's what's fun about this sort of conversation. And
you see, my point isn't to just acquiesce to his position, it's to say that it's to give his position some validity and open up that conversation to say it is about how our perception is, and not about that we absolutely know the truth, because neither of us do. It's probably important to mention that, there might be people who are shocked by what he said in regards to the Old Testament and the killing of babies and Jesus, and that may confuse people, but basically what he's driving at is the idea that the Old Testament Yahweh is not different than Jesus. In fact, Christians would say that, right? If Jesus and God the Father are one, then you have to attribute Jesus the things that are attributed to God the Father in the Old Testament. And he did tell the Israelites at some point, and I forget which, I think maybe the Midianites might be what he's referring to, that they needed to basically wipe them all out. And I'm not going to get into that so much theologically. I'll say this: I assume God had good reasons to do that. I assume all those babies are instantly in paradise, and it is consistent that in the Bible that and in the world. I mean, there's just the world that we live in. We see kids who are put in bad situations by their parents, and I would argue that the atheist would look at that and only attribute the negativity to God, is whereas I look at that and say, no, man is evil. I don't know if you've been outside, Mr. Atheist, but man is evil. And they are also accountable for their actions.
That's why I enjoy the, I take some.
But what I've noticed about you, Franklin, is that you like to talk about evolution a lot. Are you quite convinced that if evolution is true via common descent, then the Christianity is false?
I think Christianity would be false, because, well, let me ask you this. Yes is the answer. I don't mean to bloviate. If as you understand Christ and what he said, don't you think he affirmed the Old Testament, and don't you think that they're sort of mutually exclusive?
Yeah, if the interpretation of the, what we would call the historical / evangelical type Christianity, if the interpretation of the Bible is theirs, I would agree with you and them that if evolution via common descent is true, Christianity is false. Or actually, you could kind of wiggle out of it and say that Jesus in his human form was not omniscient, and so he actually thought Adam and Eve existed, and he was wrong. But that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. I think once you start going a certain distance, I'll come over to your side. Like if evidence starts to sway me that evolution's true, you'll have me converted just like you have Nathan.
What would it take for you to believe evolution is true?
I mean, I got to see it. Like it,
a
to
duck
me,
producing a crocodile.
Well,
you see the point there. It's funny because he laughs, but it's like his example is ridiculous on purpose, but kind of the point, right? Like, I don't make that claim, they do. They make the claim, and literally, it's funny too, because he used a bird and a reptile. Well, their claim is that dinosaurs changed into birds. And their whole point is, in fairness, it's not to say that a dinosaur gave birth to a bird, but their whole point is you can't see it. It just took too long. But if I say that this creature was a Tyrannosaurus Rex and now it's an ostrich, that's a miraculous friggin' claim, man. And you can go, well, I'm inserting I'm inserting hundreds of millions of years. Okay, so if I say, Jesus walked on water, I'm inserting Yahweh in that equation. The difference between me and them is they're inserting Father Time. Again, my point is they're not in science at that point. They are dealing in a religion.
I mean, show me here's the way I interpret it, and it seems to me that there's miraculous claims are made. The difference is if I say Jonah was swallowed by a whale and Yahweh did it, then you guys rightly say that sounds like a fairy tale. But if you guys say like a giant possum transformed into a whale, oh well, that's just science. Well, I would say that's Father Time making miracles. The difference is that instead of the power of Yahweh, you guys have the power of evolution over time, and neither one is demonstrable. That's the problem that I think we have, and that's why my claim is to say we're very similar. I don't try to convince you guys to my side. I'm just confused why you guys are so convinced about yours, and because I'm not convinced about your evidence, because you guys claim you have evidence. That's the difference. Like we say, yeah, a bunch of what we believe is based on faith. I could give you Tacitus and Pliny, but you're still going to go, yeah, but the Gospels aren't, nobody signed the Gospels or whatever. But I'm saying, so I know there's a lot of faith involved in what I claim.
Before, I'm not the guy to convince you of evolution, because that's not my expertise or anything. But um, like evolution is so gradual and so long, it's really hard for us to comprehend it. And
It's
I
hard to
will give
comprehend.
you that if you,
I just want to lock that in for a minute. Okay, so he said he's not the guy, and it's so long and gradual you can't see it. So is he saying even the experts that he's putting his faith in can't see it either? I mean, this is kind of um, this is kind of my point, right? I mean, I think I'm going to end it on this. I may do a part two. I don't know, but I don't want this to be too long. But the thing is this is a good part to end on, I suppose. You know, I mean, what he just said there was pretty eye-opening to me because he literally substantiates his worldview based on this idea of evolution. This is why I go to this card. If you claim to have evidence for what you say is true, and you at the same time demand evidence of me and say, you don't have the evidence. Well, by God, I have the right to say, let's talk about your evidence. You can't just go, but the experts say. It's like, no, that doesn't work, man. That does not work. You believe in something you've never seen. You've never seen this happen. In fact, I'll go out. I'm not going out on a limb. This isn't a limb at all. Nobody's seen it. Nobody's seen it. So he can say he's not the one to deal with the experts. He's not the one to deal with evolution. It's like, yeah, because he doesn't, right? He just assumes it's true, and then therefore says if Christianity doesn't meet the standard that he creates, which is a miracle standard, that his view that he just assumes is true is true. Well, that's crazy because he believes in miracles too. You see what I'm saying? If you're looking at two miracles, then you need to evaluate them as two miracle claims. But he doesn't. He evaluates his view as science. And it's true. That's what I said. It's not demonstrable. Demonstrate it for me. You can't ask Christians to demonstrate God bringing fire from heaven and then go, aha, therefore, and then say, and I say, look, I'm not even asking you to do it now. I'm saying, tell me where to go to find it. Who has it? Where is this at? Dr. James Tour, he's in this like YouTube kind of debate thing back and forth with this kind of an idiot guy. And Dr. Tour is a synthetic chemist. And he's just asking for the basics for this. Like, how does life begin? How did you guys get that we just began the whole thing, And they don't have answers for this. Here's what I'm saying. There aren't answers, man. There just aren't. They just are confident. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I don't care how confident you are. Imagine that somebody comes in and they're so confident. And they just persuade everybody. This is like a religion, right? This is like a freaking cult. Where somebody's in a lab coat, though, instead of some collar, and they're just telling everybody, it's true. You can believe it. And we know it's true. It's no belief. We know it's true. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, Christianity is stupid. All those religions are stupid. This is where it's at. This other thing where we believe Father Time did all these miracles, it's like, what? It's dumb. That's not science. It's not science. You can't. It's science fiction, man. You can't just make things up and then just pass them off and say, well, but Darwin drew finches in a book. Like, I don't care. I don't care. That doesn't help. That doesn't prove anything. If I draw Jonah being swallowed by a whale, does that mean it happened? No. It's a faith statement. And Christians believe that. Christians are honest and they stand on it. And you can go to all these other extra things, like all the changes, the life changes that have taken place, the people who have seen Jesus, right? I'm talking about today, people who have visions, and when you get, it's just visions or whatever. But you can always do that. That's the point. But they don't offer even that. They offer books. And if I say to them, but read the Bible, it's just a book written by men. I'm like, but you believe in books written by men. It's craziness. And these are people, like, he uses cognitive dissonance all the time. How is that not cognitive dissonance? Well, I mean, anyway, I don't know who's going to watch this, but maybe you stuck through it. And anyway, so hopefully you got some enjoyment out of it. I might follow it up, but I think I end up talking to this guy for a little bit longer, so I don't want to make this too long. But anyway, next time